Good morning, church family. It's good to see you. Happy Sunday. Seniors, happy Sunday. Bad news, I sabotaged some of your grades, so you're going to find out you're actually flunking soon, but nothing personal. Just don't want you guys to leave. That's all, so I won't cry too much today. No, probably won't cry at all. Anyways, throughout this month, we've been looking at this series, What Are You Thinking?, where we've been exploring the way that our thought life impacts our experience of the world. In week one, Andy Tier set things up by talking about how this battle that we often have, this spiritual battle, takes place on the level of our mind, and how our enemy loves to attack at that level, and yet God promises that there is hope to experience the renewing of our mind. In week two, Ryan looked at Colossians chapter 3 and the idea that when we calibrate our minds upon who Jesus is and what he has done, it allows us to then calibrate our lives, and we can experience new birth in that. And then last week, we saw that God gives us divine resources to fight this battle of the mind. It's not just up to our human flesh or our human strength or our human wisdom. He gives us divine resources that are effective for us winning this battle. And today we come to Philippians chapter 4, verses 8 and 9, where Paul writes this. It says, "Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. Whatever you have learned or received or heard from me or seen in me, put it into practice, and the God of peace will be with you." Now, here we have a pretty powerful landing spot for this series, What Are You Thinking? Because in this passage, Paul tells us what we should be thinking, right? You see that there? He said, think about whatever is true. Think about whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, anything excellent or praiseworthy. And so as we get started today, I'm going to give you some space, 60 seconds, to do just that. I'm going to give you 60 seconds to identify one word from that list that stands out to you. In one way you've seen that at work in your life over the last week. So just one of those words. Don't overthink it, okay? Sunsets are lovely things. Courage is admirable. This is not a graded test. This is simply a time for us to fix our minds on some of these things. So go ahead, take 60 seconds. Now, as you thought about or even continue to think about whatever it is that came to mind, I want to encourage you to think about even what happens in your body as you think about those more positive things. Do you notice a lightness? Maybe you smiled and didn't even realize it, just thinking about something that was lovely from the last week. It's interesting how that sort of thing happens when we shift our thinking. But I want to encourage you to think about one more thing. How often did your thought life over the last week produce that kind of fruit in your life? How often did you experience that peace of God that Paul talks about in this passage? How often did you experience maybe even a swelling of joy within you, just as a normal occurrence through your thought life? You see, today we're looking at this section of the book of Philippians. And this is a letter that Paul wrote while he was in prison. And do you know what the Greek word for prison means? It means prison, okay? What I mean by that is this is not a desirable space. This isn't really complicated. He was not in a good spot. He wasn't in something that would be enjoyable. It wasn't desirable circumstances. And given these circumstances, we might be surprised by the major theme of the letter. The major theme of the letter throughout is this idea of joy. Here we see Paul experiencing literal captivity, and yet he calls these Christians to dwell upon whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, anything excellent or praiseworthy, he says. Think about these things. Now, imagine maybe you or I are in Paul's shoes, and maybe shackles is better than shoes. Anyways, we're in this place where Paul's at, and we do this exercise we just did where we begin to list out the things that are true. I can imagine maybe our list would look something like this. Okay, what is true? Okay, I am in jail. That's enough. That's all I'm dwelling on, right? Can you imagine that? Like that can be a common experience for us, that whenever we sit to think about what's going on in the world, all we can see is the negative. But Paul's tapping into a core truth of creation. It's a core truth about who God is, and it's that God is the one who created all things. Whenever God created all things, he created them good. In the beginning, after he created things, he said, it is good. And while it is true that sin has come into the world and it's corrupted creation, it's even corrupted our own hearts. It's created a barrier between us and God in a lot of ways. It's broken even the relationship creation was to have with God. All of those things being true doesn't change the fact that God still created things good, and that his goodness can be seen in the world around us. But all too often, it's easier to find the things that are wrong in our world, the things that cause anxiety, suffering, and pain. It's all too easy to focus on the things that maybe bring us down in that way. I mean, how long would it take you to list maybe 5 things that would fit in categories like falsehood or corruption or impurity or unpleasant, repulsive things in the world around us? For me, it wouldn't take long, right? It doesn't take long to identify the brokenness, and yet here's something I want us to see today, and it's that our minds can be so consumed by the brokenness in front of us that we find ourselves being shaped to live as if Jesus were still in the grave. We have no hope. I want to say that one more time. Our minds can be so consumed by the brokenness in front of us that we find ourselves being shaped to live as if Jesus were still in the grave and we have no hope. Now, something I want us to recognize is that throughout this letter, Paul actually speaks directly to his pain, his suffering, the challenges he's facing, and even the conflict he sees within the church at Philippi. And yet Paul's command to rejoice was not a command to ignore the circumstances that they were facing, the pain, the conflict, and the suffering that was being experienced, but it was a call to see the pain, conflict, suffering going on and see that those things cannot thwart God's work. That even the negative things going on in our world does not prevent God from still doing what he sets out to do. And so in chapter 2, what Paul does is he tells the story of Jesus, and he helps us maybe see this. He says that Jesus was in the very nature God, but that Jesus didn't cling to his nature as God as something to take advantage of. He didn't use that nature as something to get out of suffering. He didn't use that as something to get out of pain, but rather he took on the nature of a servant. He became a human being and embraced all the limitations that came with that. In fact, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to death, even death on a cross. And it's because of these things, not despite these things, that he was exalted as Lord. See, trials, suffering, and limitations do not prevent us from rejoicing. Rather, we can look at the reality of Jesus and then look at our circumstances, and we can choose to think about whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, anything excellent or praiseworthy. And what we're going to do here in a minute is we're going to walk through these one by one. But first, I want to make something clear. Paul in this passage is not saying, think better, be better. This isn't just like a Christian call to put your head in the clouds and act as if everything in life is moving up and to the right, if everything in our world is moving up to the right. This isn't the kind of faith that Paul calls us to. This isn't the kind of faith that would say that if things are going wrong in your world, then you must have messed something up. So just think more positively. This isn't even a therapeutic kind of idea that says God just wants you to be happy and feel better. You won't find that perspective in Paul. You won't find that in Scripture. Rather, Paul is saying that fixing your heart and your mind on what is broken and lacking won't get you where you want to be. Rather, when we set our attention on what is truly good and beautiful and worthy through the person of Jesus, it has the power to transform our experience of God's presence with us. Again, this isn't a therapeutic call to think better, be better, but a wake-up call to completely reorient our lives around the truth of who Jesus is and what he's done. I want to say this again. It's not just a, hey, fix your thought life and then things will go better in your world. This is saying that reality has changed because of who Jesus is and what he has done. And we as people need to root our lives in this. And as we root our lives in the truth of what Jesus has done, it can transform our experience of the world around us. And it will produce fruit both in our lives and the world around us. So let's start at the end here. Paul says, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about these things. Those first 6 words of what is true, noble, right, whatever's pure, lovely, and admirable, these are more general sort of words that are used to, I think, explain sort of general categories. And I think what Paul's doing here by talking about things that are excellent or morally excellent or things that are praiseworthy, is he's giving us a lens to read the first 5 through. So this idea of things that are excellent or morally excellent, these things that are praiseworthy, these would be things that are praiseworthy in the eyes of God and even in the eyes of others. Those are the ways we should think through these different categories we're going to talk through as we think about what to dwell on. So Paul says we should dwell on things that are true. Things that are true, this refers to the thoughts, attitudes, and motivations and actions that reflect what is real because of who Jesus is and what he has done. These are the things that are true and we know to be true about God because of who Jesus is and what he has done. Again, whether it's thought, actions, motivations, or it's who God is, both of these things are where our mind should go to. And so you could maybe ask yourself, if you're thinking about looking for ways that this is active in your life, ask, do your thoughts about God line up with his character? Or do your thoughts reflect the reality of who God is as he's revealed himself in Scripture? Or are your circumstances clouding your view of who God is? Maybe another question to ask in this space of what is true. Do your thoughts about others reflect what is true because of what Jesus has done? Do your thoughts about yourself reflect what is true because of who God is and what he has done? Do you see that change is possible in you and in others, or do you think that things are just kind of stuck the way they are? Do you see the relationships you have around you and say, like, okay, false peace is okay. As long as we're not fighting, that's okay. Like, let's not actually press in and speak truth into one another's life. If so, you may be missing out on this full picture of what is true that Paul invites us to dwell upon. Next, he says that we should dwell on things that are noble. Things that are noble are things that are worthy of honor, whether they're overtly Christian or not. So, in your life, if you want to think more about these things, look for examples in your life of people choosing courage in the face of fear. We can fix our mind on those things, and that's a positive thing to do. Look for examples of people choosing love in a culture that accepts hate as normative. When people choose to love the way that Jesus did, we can dwell on that and that can shape our thinking. Look for examples of people choosing integrity when a political culture tells us that we should choose party over all. When we see people choosing integrity above all, that's something that is noble that should draw our attention. And as we fix our minds on that, we get a glimpse at who God is and the way he's at work. If you want a fantastic picture of this, I want to encourage you, pick up the book Theo of Golden and look at Theo and the character within that book, and it'll just give you a fantastic picture of this noble type of living, okay? Only one thing to say about that, you're welcome, all right? That's all. Next, we should fix our minds or dwell upon things that are just and right. This is talking about the idea of justice and righteousness. It's one word, those two words that we have in English have the same root in Greek. And so this is the idea that when people are set right with God and one another, it's when people's dignity and value are recognized and honored. Justice is rooted in God's character, and it carries with it the idea of relational wholeness, relationships being set right, restoration of relationships with God and with other people. So, where do you see justice and righteousness at work in the world around you? Where do you see people speaking for the voiceless? Think about God-honoring efforts to protect the unborn. These are things that should draw our attention and we can dwell on as a picture of what is just and right. Think about God-honoring efforts to see immigrants treated as the image bearers that they are. We can fix our minds on this as a picture of what is just and right. Think about the spaces in our world where you see people elevating the dignity and value of those that are often overlooked and who are vulnerable. These are opportunities for us to celebrate and to dwell upon what is just and right. Paul says we should dwell on things that are pure. This speaks to both moral purity, but then also a purity, an idea of like genuine thoughts or genuine purpose, genuine words, genuine actions, things that don't have mixed motivations in or double-mindedness engaged in it. So where do you see pure words in our world? Where do you see actions without mixed motivations? Where do you see honorable purposes pursued without hidden agendas? We can think about and celebrate these things. In our own lives and our relationships with others, we can seek to ask what are often referred to as pure questions, which are questions where you actually want to hear a response. Do you realize how few times we maybe do that? Oftentimes when we ask questions, we're trying to trap the other person or lead them or find a way to get them in trouble rather than just asking the question like, hey, I've noticed this, respond. And like not expecting to like say, gotcha, or anything like that. We can do this as a picture of like teaching ourselves to have a little bit of these pure motivations, these pure words in our own life. We should dwell upon things that are lovely. Lovely things are things that are pleasing and agreeable, even attractive. So where do you see pleasing things in our world that align with what God finds pleasure in? Where do you see beauty in the world around us, things that draw you in? We so often overlook the reality that we have creation all around us that can draw our attention to the lovely beauty of the God that we worship. Like a sunset, that is an incredibly lovely thing that should draw our attention to God in a unique way. We should see something like an ocean or mountains, any number of things like flowers blooming in the spring. These are all opportunities for us to look at things in our world and say, oh my goodness, not everything is falling apart. There are good and beautiful things here. And this is important for us to do because it's so easy to have pain and suffering or difficult circumstances crowd out the good and the beautiful things happening. We can fix our minds on things that are lovely and choose to fix our attention towards those things. We should dwell on things that are admirable. These are things that are appealing, worthy of reputation, and likely to win the admiration of others. So even the idea of like avoiding what is likely to give unnecessary offense. That's something we talked about a little over a month ago. So where do you see people that are standing for truth without demonizing people that disagree with them? Where do you see people doing what we talked about last week of using divine resources to attack arguments and lies in our world rather than attacking people? Where do you see people pursuing what is good and right for others and for our world, even if it seems like an uphill battle? Even if it seems like they're fighting against what is impossible? Rather than telling people, hey, you should just be more practical, if we see people pursuing what is best for our world and what is best in light of God's design, that's something that should draw our admiration. And as we fix our minds on those things, it can help us break out of this thought that things are just stuck the way they are. Paul says, think about such things. Or better yet, let your mind continually dwell on these things. Think about them over and over so that your conduct will be shaped by them. Again, think back to that question we asked at the beginning. How often did your thought life, even in this last week, produce this kind of positive fruit in your life? The kind of fruit that results in what Paul calls here the God of peace being with you. Let's read verse 9. It says, whatever you have learned or received or heard from me or seen in me, put it into practice, and the God of peace will be with you. You see, this church here had already heard Paul's teaching, the tradition he had handed down. They'd heard his spoken word, but they'd also seen his living example of what he was calling them to in this. And so Paul says, hey, put into practice what you've seen in me. This is another great reminder that church in this Christian life is not a solo sport. It's not something we were designed to do on our own. Rather, we should be surrounded by people who can point us in a positive direction, and also that we can point in a positive direction too. So that whenever life is hard and it seems like circumstances are all negative and that's crowding in on us, we can have people around us who speak what is true, what is noble, what is right. We can have people that speak what is pure and lovely and admirable, what is anything excellent or praiseworthy. They can help us see these things when we can't see them for ourselves. We need people who can model these for us so that we can anchor ourselves not to the latest cause that we see on social media or on the news, but to what is truly true and noble and right, pure, lovely, and admirable. And to do this, we have to be intentional. My friend Angelo says that sometimes you have to take the head trash out to the dumpster. And this is a way to do that, to get all that junk that is there and say, you have no space here. Instead, I'm going to reflect on what is true because of who Jesus is and what he has done. And as we do this, Paul says, the God of peace will be with you. We need to remember that God is a God of peace, and peace is a fruit of the Spirit living in us. I think what Paul is saying in this passage is that while it's true that if you're a follower of Jesus, that God's Spirit lives in you, oftentimes our thought life can block our experience of this. So while God's Spirit may be living in you, if you are simply focused on everything that's broken instead of fixing your attention on who God is and what's being done, it may be true that God's in you, but you don't get to experience the benefit of that. You don't actually experience the peace that comes from God's presence. But whenever we shift the way we're thinking, we're able to experience what is true, that God is truly with us. And it allows us to see that the negative circumstances in our life are not bigger than God is. Now think about the way that Paul actually modeled this for his readers. We talked earlier about what Paul's list may look like if he were to list what is true, right? What is true? I'm in prison. That's the end of the list. But whenever Paul did this, he didn't deny that as being something that is true. But if you look back to chapter 1, he writes this in chapter 1, verse 12. He says, "Now I want you to know, brothers and sisters, that what has happened to me has actually served to advance the gospel. As a result, it has become clear throughout the whole palace guard and to everyone else that I am in chains for Christ. And because of my chains, most of the brothers and sisters have become confident in the Lord and dare all the more to proclaim the gospel without fear." So whenever Paul would make his list, it would look something like this. Okay, what is true? I am in jail. But he wouldn't stop there. He would say, what is true? I am in jail, and because I am in jail, I've had the opportunity to share the gospel with every stinking guard that walks within hearing distance of the place I'm being held. Yes, I am in jail, and that means that, other Christians around the world are being even more bold in their faith. Yes, it's true that I am in jail, but that's actually given me more time to write letters to the churches. Like 4 of our New Testament letters were written while Paul was in prison. Yes, I am in jail, but the God of peace is present with me. You see, this type of thinking that Paul invites us to doesn't ignore or reject the true hard circumstances in our life. It just says that the circumstances that we are facing cannot thwart what God can do in and through wherever he has us. Like, it doesn't catch God off guard when things are hard in life. That doesn't create a barrier from God working his plan in and through whatever it is that we are facing. We can fix our minds on something that is greater than what is screaming at us because of our circumstances. Now, I want to be clear about something as we consider this whole idea of our thoughts. You see, this is only possible to have this kind of perspective because the evil, suffering, and hurt and sin in our world has been defeated once and for all through Jesus. See, if Jesus has not defeated sin, then death should consume our thinking and we should be really afraid of it. Do you get that? Like if Jesus has not defeated sin, then that should consume our thinking and terrify us. If Jesus has not risen from the dead, then injustice in our world should paralyze us because there's no hope of that being overcome. There's no hope of things being made right in the future if suffering and death truly do have the last word. If Jesus is not Lord, if he's not currently reigning, then maybe you should just run after whatever sounds or feels good in the moment. Because if he's not Lord, like what's the point, right? But if Jesus has defeated death and sin, if Jesus is reigning as Lord, then it means that our circumstances do not have the last word. Rather, we can pursue these types of things. Because Jesus has risen from the dead, suffering and injustice will not have the last word. Death and sin will not have the last word. Rather, the God of peace has given us a way to experience his presence in and through his Spirit living in us. And because of that, we can pursue what is excellent and praiseworthy without being paralyzed by the brokenness in the world around us. So tomorrow, if you're a senior in college and you're taking finals, or if you are working somewhere and you have a meeting with a difficult coworker, or you're going into a meeting and you realize all along you've been the difficult coworker and you have to admit that tomorrow. Or maybe you find yourself in a spot where you're going to see the brokenness in our world that is most clearly seen in a temper tantrum of a 3-year-old. Or you experience the hurt of sickness, disease, or even the words of someone else. What Paul is saying here is we can choose in the midst of all of this to fix our minds on what is true, noble, right, lovely, and admirable. We can actually take the hurt and the pain we have to God and say, God, right now, this seems bigger than you, but I am choosing to fix my mind on what is true because of who you are and what you have done. And what Paul is saying is that the God of peace will be with you. You can share this hurt and pain with faithful friends who can walk with you and who can speak truth even when it seems to be crowded out by everything else in your life. And as we wrap things up, what I want to do is create some more space for you to reflect on that prompt we had at the beginning. In fact, what I would encourage you to do is each day this week, take 10 minutes. Whether that's 5 minutes in the morning, 5 minutes in the evening, or just 10 minutes at once. And I want you to look at the list of things that we just talked about. To think about things or whatever is true, whatever is true, noble, right, whatever is lovely, admirable, pure. I want you to list as many things as you can on that list. And during those 10 minutes throughout the day, think about those things and begin to take inventory on what God does in your heart and in your mind. If as you are working through, you come up with one thing, fix your mind on that one thing. If you come up with 30 things, maybe take some time to engage with each of those, maybe one a day. If you can't come up with anything, see that as an opportunity to come to God and say, God, right now, I can't see your goodness. And I trust that you don't want me to feel guilty about that, but I just want to ask you, would you show me the ways that these things are around me? Would you show me what is true? Would you show me what is noble? Would you show me what is right? Would you show me what is pure? Would you show me what is lovely? Would you show me what is admirable? Would you show me anything that is excellent or praiseworthy? Like, help me to see those things. Church family, this week, receive joy. Receive the joy that comes by thinking about what is true, what is noble, what is right, what is lovely, what is admirable, what is pure, anything excellent or praiseworthy. Receive joy. Have a great week.